I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe people. I'd also like to acknowledge my boss, Minister Anand, my partner in crime, Deputy Minister Matthews, and so many others. Now, this is a big reunion. As I look around, I see many familiar faces. Just here in the front 2 rows, I see 3 former bosses responsible for lots. Yeah, lots of upbringing. But it's great to be back here in person with everyone this year. And being in person, it's just so great to have that social connection, that reconnection that we've been lacking over the course of the last number of years. CDAI is a tremendously important event from my perspective. The focus on defense, the focus on security, the conversations, the issues that are being brought up, so important for our society. And so I'd like to extend congratulations on the conference's 90th edition. C'est un jalon impressionnant qui représente un beau record de contributions au discours public, quelque chose dont nous avons davantage besoin dans notre pays. Merci encore une fois de m'avoir invité à participer à la séance aujourd'hui. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. I also understand there's been some questions that have been deferred to me here later on, and I thank my predecessors for that. So I'd like to talk about a few points before we get into the gist of the conversation. So when I spoke to you last year, it was 2 weeks into me being in the acting CDS role. I called it my coming out moment. And at that time, I referred to the previous 2 weeks as a blur. Well, that was kind of a term that foreshadowed the following year. And the last year has been, quite the blur, quite the change, crisis after crisis. You can't make this stuff up. We've had significant change in the department. Shown here, significant change in the leadership team with our new minister, new deputy minister, our VCDS who spoke to you this morning, and tremendous changes in our security environment. You can almost say that change has been accelerated over the course of the last 12 months. But there's some things that haven't changed. And as I go around, as I talk to our people here in Canada and around the world, the members of our armed forces continue to do remarkable things. The people of your armed forces continue to serve with valor, with courage, with pride, with dedication, with professionalism, and I am proud of them each and every day. But make no mistake, we're stretched pretty thin. And last year was a very hard one on the institution. I like to say that that train wreck, otherwise known as 2021, I was happy to see that in the rearview mirror, but we've had a pretty rude start to 2022. I think you'll all agree. So with that rude start, let me start off in talking about well, I call it the elephant in the room, but everybody's talking about it, and that is the crisis that's currently consuming us in Ukraine, where Putin's unprovoked, reprehensible war on democratic and freedom-loving Ukraine is not just an attack on Russia's neighbor, but it's an attack on the rules-based international order, that order that has done so much for Western peace and security and prosperity for 70 years. And it's no exaggeration that Putin's ambitions and unbridled aggression pose the most significant threat to world security since the end of the Cold War and perhaps since the end of the Second World War. Putin's recklessness has made the world a much more dangerous place and has shaken our geopolitical system in ways that we've not seen for many, many years, and we'll feel that it'll reverberate for many years into the future. He's seeking to turn back the clock, to restore imperial glories, whether real or imagined. But his war is not going as he intended. Indeed, he overestimated his own capability, Russia's own capability, and underestimated that of the Ukrainians, the fighting spirit of the Ukrainians. That spirit which our troops on Operation Unifier did so much to help guide in the right direction with the training that we provided. It's the will and the skills of the Ukrainians to defend their country that we're seeing playing out here. And we always knew that that was a fundamental piece to victory. I think it was Napoleon that said that morale to the physical is 3 to 1. And this is a case being played out right now. So Russian soldiers are not being greeted as liberators. They're being seen as unwanted foreign occupiers and invaders. So they're not enjoying the rapid success that was planned. Instead, it's denigrated into a slow, costly battle of attrition. With Ukrainians, ordinary people being thrust into extraordinary circumstances, fighting overwhelming odds and being an inspiration for the world. And Russian rank and file are not really sure what they're fighting for at all, and it's showing. Putin does not have the support of his own people, and it's his war alone. You know, in doing this, he sought to create and exploit gaps and seams in the NATO alliance. And in fact, he's done exactly the opposite. And if anything, he's brought the alliance closer together. And I've seen that with my interactions with chiefs of defense counterparts at various sessions. And it's inspiring to see NATO going back to its raison d'etre and coming together. And that coming together, that demonstration of strength, that's going to have to continue into the future. Nous devons nous rappeler que c'est seulement le 15e jour de ces conflits et que la guerre est un concours d'adaptation. Comme ils n'ont pas atteint leurs objectifs et sont maintenant embourbés, les prochaines étapes d'adaptation et leur approche seront cruciales pour déterminer la trajectoire qui suivra cette guerre. So in the Q&A session, we get into more of some initial observations, if you wish, more on our involvement. But I do have to say that I'm incredibly proud about how the Canadian Armed Forces have responded throughout this, from the intelligence assessment through the very deliberate retrograde operation that we did out of Ukraine based on intelligence and warnings. Very, very well executed, to the delivery of aid, which is happening very well. And just the way our people have responded throughout has been a source of pride. But this has put a renewed focus on our contributions elsewhere in Europe, on Operation Reassurance. You know, indeed, the Minister and I just returned late last night from spending a few days over there this week in Latvia and at Joint Forces Command Naples. And, you know, as I alluded to, this aggression, this naked aggression, has given the alliance new energy, and our allies are united like they have not been for some time. Our troops over there are focused, and when you look them in the eye and talk about their mission, you could see the passion, you could see the dedication, the professionalism. They know why they are there. They know why they sit on the front lines of freedom. Morale is high. Our leadership of the multinational battle group in Latvia continues to be a source of much praise. They want more Canada over there, as the bookstore says. And we continue to get that ask. So you heard the announcement that Reassurance is going to be renewed. The mission is going to be with us for some time. We're going to keep focus on that part of the world for some time. And we'll continue to adapt our force structure based and capability requirements based on the needs in theater. Et de même pour la force de réaction de l'OTAN, qui a suscité beaucoup d'intérêt. Même si nous avons basé un certain nombre de nos plans d'urgence expéditionnaires sur le déploiement des éléments de NRF depuis quelques années, la force de réaction suscite maintenant beaucoup plus d'attention. But let's step back a bit and look at the global landscape. You know, writ large, our resolve is being tested. And this is a test that the democracies of the West cannot fail. Because these events in Ukraine are only the most obvious source of stress on our rules-based international order. And I think it's crucial to note that China has been watching and learning. Learning everything from the operational lessons on the ground to how we, as the international community, responds to it. Autocratic states, great and small, are working flat out to undermine what was once assumed to be the hard-won consensus towards liberal democracy. They add to and sometimes amplify other threats. Extremism, cultural conflict, polarization of societies are all challenging democratic institutions. Criminal organizations, terrorist groups threaten peace and stability wherever they are. Climate change and the related natural disasters and population migration flows likewise are driving instability. Now, even here at home, climate change is having a huge impact on the frequency and the intensity of our armed forces, our military's deployments domestically, and our capacity to fulfill other core missions. Now, these are dangerous times, increasingly dangerous as we go into the future, and the Canadian Armed Forces will do its part to defend Canada and Canadians as always. But this last couple of years has not been easy on our institution. Much like the rest of society, the pandemic has had pretty significant impacts on our people, on our individual resilience, and we've seen some cracks in our own society. We've seen the polarization that many of our Western peers are facing happen here at home. And beyond these societal challenges, we've seen our military employed in very non-traditional ways that we've not expected. Our armed forces has always been there to boost the capacity of first responders in domestic operations. But we've seen this increased frequency and intensity of late. And that was even before COVID-19. This pandemic has seen the largest domestic military operation in Canadian military history, not only in terms of numbers, but in terms of duration as well. And it has pushed us as an institution to our limits. The tempo has exhausted many of our members who have played a leading role in our nation's response to limit the spread of the virus. And it's consumed much of our bandwidth for the last couple of years. So we were already short on our trained effective strength, and the pandemic-driven health measures have reduced our recruiting and entry-level training capacity, and so we're working to fill those gaps. Our training was reduced, which has had an impact on our readiness. And throughout, the role and strength of Canadian health services that have done so much over the last few years has been further eroded. Their capacity has been further eroded by all of this. Indeed, our health services capacity has become a limiting factor in just so much of what we do, especially in terms of collective training. So the pandemic has challenged all of us as individuals and as an institution. And we can't carry on like that because more change is on the way, and we've got to become rapidly ready for that increasingly dangerous future. So how are we going to do that? We're going to reconstitute the Canadian Armed Forces. We're going to rebuild it, but not build back the same. We're going to build back ready for that ever-increasing dangerous future. La politique nationale de défense nous demande d'assurer la protection du Canada et des Canadiens, de veiller à la sécurité de l'Amérique du Nord, d'être engagé dans le monde et participant activement aux efforts visant à maintenir la paix et la stabilité mondiale. And for many years, our strategic mindset has been focused on expeditionary operations. But now we need to, it emphasized engaged. We're maintaining a fighting force to be deployed anywhere in the world. And Ukraine has showed us that we can never and must never step back from that responsibility. But still, as we refocus the CAF's effort, the domestic is going to become much more important. Strong at home. Defending Canadians at home, always our top priority, but even much more effort needs to be put on that. So it's time for introspection, because we can't be focused on how we've done business in the past. It's time to examine our strategic mindset. It's time to think about not the CAF that we are, but the CAF we want to be, the armed forces that we need to be. So in our reconstitution, we're going to look at three things, three priorities: people, operations, and modernization. The people piece has to come first. And front and center is evolving our culture, changing those aspects of our culture that we absolutely have to have in place to win the battle for talent, to be able to attract and retain talent for wherever we may find it in Canadian society. Because if we don't keep pace with the changing demographics, the changing face of Canada, we are going to be irrelevant. Part of the people priority is getting our numbers back up. And to that end, we're energizing the recruiting system and the personnel production pipeline to be able to get those numbers rapidly back up. Addressing retention is key as well. Even though we've got some of the best retention numbers amongst our Western allies, we've got to make sure we're keeping the right people in, the right occupations, the right ranks, after investing so much into people. And so we've recently published the Canadian Armed Forces Retention Strategy. Part and parcel of this is addressing something all of us all Canadians face, and that's the skyrocketing cost of living. Every young Canadian is facing this, but it's more acute for our people because we expect them to move across the country more frequently. So I'm seized with this, seized with making it better for our people, and it's got to be at the top of our agenda. Operations is a second priority, because as we rebuild, as we reconstitute, and current events are showing this, we absolutely have to keep our eye on readiness and operations, ensuring that we can continue to deliver overseas and, most importantly, domestically for when that call comes. But we are taking a close look at each and every one of our operations, ensuring it is right-sized, ensuring that it's producing the strategic effect that we need while making sure that we take a look at those low-density, high-demand occupations and ranks, that they are well-placed where they need to be. And then finally, modernization. And I know the Vice talked to you a little bit about that earlier on this morning, but there are a number of aspects to this. Continuing to push forward the projects that are in strong, secure, engaged, because we know we're going to need them. Continuing to focus on the North, including pieces like NORAD modernization, because we know we are no longer as secure, no longer as insular here in North America and in Canada as we once were. Continuing to invest in those new domains, space, cyber, and how we integrate all those domains with land, air, sea to produce that unified, integrated effect. And then how do we work better with the whole of government, with our other government partners and our allies? So important. How do we rapidly integrate new technology? Because the other thing we're seeing in the security environment is a rapid acceleration of technological change. And how do we keep up with that? How do we keep ahead of potential adversaries in terms of AI, quantum computing, robotics? So important. So that modernization piece is going to continue to be a priority. As we focus on the future, or as we focus on the present and current operations, we cannot afford to mortgage the future. And so that is going to continue. So reconstitution is going to take some time. But given world events, we can't afford for it to take forever. Indeed, we're looking at ways of accelerating it, of taking bold measures. I've challenged the team to think outside the box, to think about what activities we are currently doing that we can temporarily or permanently park so that we can focus our very limited, what I like to call change capacity, on those high priority items, because we absolutely have to. Where can we take risk so we can prioritize getting ourselves much readier for that much more dangerous future? So I'm going to wrap up here before we get into Q&A, but let me repeat. This has been a difficult year for the armed forces, but our people have continued to deliver. And it needs to be a source of pride for all of us. And in these difficult times, we're going to continue, we're going to carry on. It's given our people renewed focus, renewed purpose, and it should for all Canadians. Les membres des Forces armées canadiennes et l'équipe de la défense en général comptent parmi les Canadiens et les Canadiennes les plus professionnels, dévoués et travaillants qui soient. Je suis extrêmement fier de servir à leur côté. Et je suis déterminé à utiliser mon temps dans ce rôle pour stabiliser l'institution, et cette période de grande agitation. This is a crucial time in the history of not only our country, but our armed forces. Great challenges rest in front of us. Challenges and changes. Changes to our culture. Changes to our larger role, what it means to defend Canada and Canadians. Changes to our force structure, to our operating concepts, and to our capabilities. And like I said, everything has to be on the table. These changes are going to be difficult because tribalism exists in the institution, and we have to break that down. But it's necessary to make those hard decisions so that we are able to react to that ever-changing future. And I think I will leave it with that and get into the conversation. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.